Good Lord, there's a lot of you. Hi, everyone. How you all doing? Oh, it's a hi, Simon. That's very nice. How you all doing? All right. Bad jokes. I guess a knock-knock joke. That's what we were talking about before. All right. Do you all know the format of a knock-knock joke? I have a competition, like my boy and Siri. One of them will get knock-knock jokes first. Turned out my boy was. So I'll do one of his favorites. Knock-knock. Who's there? Cows go. No, they don't. They go moo. It's not very good, is it? There we go. Big photo of a lot of you looking attractive. You want a Sean Connery joke? Knock, knock. Dishes. Dish is not a good joke. There we go. I think I managed to do it. It's Sean Connery. So, Zen and the art of open source maintenance. If you've ever been to a Selenium conference before, you know that this is normally the State of the Union. So let's talk about the State of the Union. It's been a big year, but I think it can be summarized pretty easily with, it's all good. If you've ever been to Australia, sometimes when things are going really badly, they go, it's all good, mate. This is genuinely all good. I think in 2013, I stood on a Selenium conference stage and said, we're going to ship Selenium 3 by Christmas. We have now shipped by Christmas. Which actually took a phenomenal amount of hard work. The committers ran around like lunatics, threw code in, lots of testing, lots of people getting our continuous integration systems up and running again. It was all quite exciting. Almost as exciting as when we did the Selenium 2 release. But this one was like calmer, it's nicer. Have you all migrated to Selenium 3 yet? Yeah. Some of you have. Some of you are like, it's out? What happened? So that's good. The W3C specification, we had what we think will be our last face-to-face meeting in Lisbon. We did what we always do, which is pick a highly contentious subject and then argue about it endlessly before realizing that we kind of all agree and then giving up on arguing. So I think that's going to be April, May next year, I think is when we're hoping to ship it. I should just say April or May and leave the year empty, shouldn't I? Previous experience suggests this is a good idea. Yeah, so it's all good. There we go. If I was doing State of the Union, I would now have like 50 minutes to pad, desperately umming and ahhing, and I just don't know that many knock-knock jokes. So I thought I'd talk about Zen and the art of motorcycle maintenance, open source maintenance. Obviously, the title is inspired by the book. Have you all read the book? Has anyone read the book? Like 5 people have. Good. So it's just a nice title for a talk then. Who here writes code for a living? Okay, that's most of you. How many of you never write code at all? Like there's like 3 managers in the audience. So code. Let's run the numbers with code. The Standish chaos report. These are the numbers from the latest one. 16.2% of projects, 9% of projects in large companies come in on time and on budget, which means, over 80% of projects come in either late or they come in over budget. And that's not a good state of affairs, right? Worse, the projects that get launched are typically launched with apparently 42% of their planned features. So basically, they're late, they're expensive, and they don't work. Worse than that, the 42% of features are composed of code, right? The most up-to-date numbers I can find for defects per 1,000 lines of code, a KLOC, is somewhere in the range of 15 to 50. So in 1,000 lines of code, you could have up to 50 bugs. More if I'm writing it. I think this tells us something very important. It tells us that software fails all the time. This is a tweet from the LA Police Department when Facebook went down. Doesn't happen very often, but it went down. and people decided the most appropriate response was to call the police. And I think this is actually quite a measured reply. Like, I think Facebook is not a law enforcement issue. Please don't call us about it being down. We don't know when Facebook will be back up. They didn't know when it was going to be back up. It's all quite entertaining. Failure also looks like this. This is the Selenium project on GitHub. You can see here we have 334 open bugs, and we have 1,890 closed bugs. This is because we moved from Selenium Google Code, where what we did is we just marked every bug as closed. Which made us feel awesome for about 30 seconds, and then you guys started filing more bugs, so thanks. I mean, we did the same thing when we migrated from Jira to Google Code. It's like, we have no idea how to handle bugs. Yeah, if it's important, someone will let us know. But this is what failure looks like. This is what software, bad software, tells us. And the thing that I always tell my junior engineers when I'm working in them is that all code is shit. You know it, right? Like, the numbers tell us it's not good. How many of you have worked on somebody else's code and gone, this is beautiful? Just sat back and like, I'm not touching the keyboard. I literally cannot make this better. Like, and that's just being optimistic, right? Most of us, confronted with somebody else's code base, do the only sensible thing that we can think of, which is to propose a rewrite using framework du jour and language du jour. Probably nowadays Node.js and JavaScript, right? What are you doing? It's a banking app. What am I going to do it in? JavaScript. Are you mad? Code is shit. Like, obviously, things work, right? Like, we live in this hugely connected world. I see some of you using laptops. You know, we've got phones. Software has seeped into every single part of our lives, and it clearly works. But it's like making a sausage, right? Like, you don't want to peer inside and go like, oh, that's what's in it. Just appreciate it. I mean, there's a plus side. Leonard Cohen, I mean, plus side isn't that Leonard Cohen is dead. That's a terrible thing. But this is the quote that got passed around quite a lot from his song Anthem. Ring the bells that can still ring. Forget your perfect offering. Nobody writes perfect code, right? There's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. Right? Even though the code is awful, even though there are bugs, even though it's terrible, that's actually a good thing, right? And that's because for an open source project, these bugs, these rough edges, are the gateway to collaboration and contribution. If the Selenium project was totally perfect, why would you contribute? Like, there's nothing left to do. The thing that is perfect is also dead. There's nothing to do with it. And this was a lesson that Joe Walnes taught me a long time ago. He and I were talking about open source and how you can work on it effectively. And his advice was make the APIs perfect. Like, the code you put out there, the contract that you put out there with your code, the thing that everyone uses, that's really hard to change. That's immovable. The minute people start leaning on it, it becomes stuck. But the implementation doesn't really matter. Make it awful, make it work, show people what it's meant to do, and someone can come along and they can make it better. On the Selenium project, we've seen this several times. I used to joke that the Selenium grid was written by Frenchmen. It's not really a joke, it's actually a fact. Francois Reynard, who was working at eBay at the time, wrote Selenium Grid, the current version. And Christian Rosenwald came along and was so infuriated by the quality of the code that he rapidly started gaining commit and the commit bit as he fixed it. And we still, in the project, occasionally go like, would Christian like this? Probably when we're dealing with threads, and the answer is normally no. No, he would not. So you want people to contribute, right? You want them to be part of your project. You want them to be doing interesting things. Do Do you know the best way, other than making it perfect, to prevent people from contributing? Make it really complex. Right, walk into a code base with a million different layers and all these moving pieces and XML and JSON and maybe reading config out of some sort of HTTP server which is only up 3 times a day, and on a Wednesday you have to turn widdershins before you're allowed to get to it. Who knows? Complexity destroys the inhabitability of your code base. You can't live in a complex code base. It's just impossible. We've tried. Gosh knows we've tried, but it just doesn't work. Anyone here heard of a piece of software called Findbugs? Some of you. Findbugs is this sort of Java program, and it's a static analyzer. So you run it over your code base, and it tells you how awful it is. I mean, it doesn't make retching noises. It actually does, like, which is a correct response, right? What it does is it tells you those problems. And that's been going for 10 years. It's about the same age as the Selenium project. But they are abandoning it. They can't get people to contribute because the code is so complicated. And that's a sad thing, right? Like, Findbugs provides a lot of utility. It would be lovely if it carried on. But it's dying. So the first major rule of participating in open source and making open source maintainable: be simple. Don't try and come up with a general solution. The general solutions will appear. When presented with a problem, I think most engineers, most software engineers, will leap for maximum complexity by doing a generic framework. I need to add 2 numbers. What if I need to add more numbers? What if it's not just adding? What if it has to deal with irrational numbers? What if it has to deal with irrational people? And so rather than just doing, a simple addition, they write a framework. I remember being at Google once as an SET, and we were discussing, like, how would you start working on this project? And at least half the room sort of went, I'd start writing a framework to make the testing easier. It's like, that, no, just start somewhere. Be small, have it grow. Don't be an idiot, don't hurt yourself. Like, there's a maxim in software, in test-driven development about do the simplest thing that could possibly work. Sometimes the simplest thing is actually quite complicated. Simple is not stupid. Simple is clear, simple is readable. Simple is a good thing. And here's something I learned. Nobody wants to do a bad job unless they're actively malicious. Anyone here actively malicious? Okay, we have one malicious person. Nobody wants to do a bad job. Nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, yeah, I'm going to really screw it up. I mean, at the end of the day, you might be going, oh, I screwed it up. But you don't start your day that way. Nobody goes to work. How soul-crushing must it be to want to do a bad job every day? Right? Even Donald Trump doesn't want to do a bad job. He will... Bring me a drink. Although Marcus just shouted out drink, because last night at the dinner, if you mention he who must not be named by name, not Voldemort, that's fine. Nobody wants to do a bad job, right? Absolutely no one. And so, one of the realizations when it comes to working in open source, like, the code comes in and occasionally you're going like, I literally don't understand this. Or the bug report comes in and you go like, I don't know what the heck is going on here. That's because there's a reason for it, right? Nobody is doing this deliberately. Nobody is giving you bad code, bad reports, bad software, bad environments. Nobody does that deliberately. I mean, somebody might, but I've yet to meet them. And so when I wrote that slide and I was working on this deck, I realized that, this isn't a talk about software. It really isn't, right? Like, it sounds like it. Hey, look, lines of code and metrics of failures, and how do you avoid writing bad code, and hey, are there any design patterns? This isn't a talk about software, because code is people, right? As a lead engineer, I used to tell people, like, I don't really write much code. My job is to walk around and talk to people. Like, your software engineers, the senior ones, are seldom seen writing code as much as the junior engineers. They spend a lot of time talking, communicating, teaching people new skills, new habits, new abilities. right? I mean, I was saying to someone fairly recently, it's like, oh yeah, I was a senior engineer. I used to walk like 10 Ks a day, and then in the office I'd do 5 more because I just walk around padding between my desks. I mean, I drank an awful lot of coffee, as you can tell. But code is people, right? People matter. They're precious. They're human. They're a vital thing. And code is also poetry. So just take a moment, close your eyes, and think of a sunrise. Think of the most beautiful sunrise that you can remember that you've experienced. If you haven't seen a sunrise, maybe you're a vampire. In which case, think of the supermoon or something that you really like. Okay? I'll give you just a few seconds. Okay? Now, turn to the person next to you, and in 5 words, tell them something about that sunrise that you imagined. Go for it. Okay, all right. You all need to learn to count. That was not 5 words. But thank you. How many people said exactly the same thing to each other? Did anyone say the same thing as their neighbor? No? Oh, well, I mean, you only had 5 words and you had to describe a sunset. We all know what a sunset looks like. Code is like that. People give you a problem in English, and they go, can you make this happen? And you go, of course I can make this happen. And you give the same problem to 2 people, they will do it in very different ways. The last project I was on at Facebook, Buck, the build tool, you could literally go into the code base and see who'd written which bit of it, because we each had our own styles, right? One guy had a very workmanlike style of code, and it was like fairly procedural. Somebody had a beautiful functional style. It was lovely to see. Like, he'd take a problem and just distill it, and you go like, yeah, that's it. And I wrote like, you know, one style of object-oriented code, and somebody else wrote another style of object-oriented code. Code is poetry. It's how we express ourselves. And the best thing is, with open source, with our work, it's collaborative poetry. There's no other art form like it in the world, right? We sit there, and we work with people, and we try and build this thing together, and we have to do it by talking to them. And we do that with trust and shared values. Somebody on the Selenium project recently sort of went, I'm not very comfortable with people just committing straight to trunk. They're going in, there's no code review going on. And I wrote this sort of surprisingly long reply, going like, look, the reason why they're able to do that is because we trust them. You get the commit bit on the Selenium project because you've demonstrated that you're interested in the project, that you can write code, that you can follow the shared values that we have. And that's how it works, right? And those shared values are things like simplicity. We strive for elegance. We don't mind having vigorous debate about all sorts of things. David and I, David Burns sitting in the front row, have very strong opinions about how things should be done, and we argue about it, and then we give each other a hug and buy each other a steak, and it's all fine. And fun, right? The Selenium project in particular is about fun. There are so many in-jokes. You come to the IRC channel, Internet Relay Chat, it's like Slack for the older generation. Come there, type who broke it. It will tell you that I broke it, because there was a phase where every commit that I landed would break the tree, and so it became like the running joke. You're having a bad day. Somebody goes like, hey, do you need a hug? Like somebody arrived on the channel when my manager has told me I must use Selenium, and I don't know how to code. And the best thing that the project did, it was really nice, taught this guy how to code, guided him through picking which language he should use, and then guided him in like resources, and when he ran into a problem, helped him learn how to code. And the nicest thing was, a few months later, when the same thing happened again, this chap came and helped. He was one of the leading voices going, oh, you should do this. So be gentle with each other. Code is something that we feel very passionately about. It's very important to us. If it wasn't very important to us, we wouldn't be doing coding for a living. Like, does anyone not care about the code that they write? It's like, done now. Like, you know, you put a lot of effort into it. Like, it's a creative endeavor, and like any creative endeavor, it's hard to throw away that art, right? And so you feel passionately about it, and you argue about it. And, you stand at whiteboards and you go, this is how it's meant to be done. And the other person goes, but we should use Node. And you're going, what? Be gentle, be calm, like it's fine. The other person is coming from a position where they are perfectly valid, like the story in their head. We all have stories in our heads, right? We all have a narrative. Like, in the films where like, hi, this is Dave. Scratch. How did I get here? Yeah, yep, that's it. There's a couple of people nodding. Other people are going like, he's clearly delusional. And that's okay. We all have stories in our heads, right? And everyone has that. But the story I tell about you is not the story you tell about you. And so when those stories don't work, take a step back, take a breath, think. Really important thing to do, praise in public, right? If someone does something awesome, say thank you. That's cool, it doesn't hurt. If someone does a fantastic piece of work, recognize it. On the Selenium project, we had Yari Bakken a long time ago. He wrote beautiful code as well. He used to be a classical musician, and what he would do, he got in the habit of practicing. So every day he'd just practice writing code to solve a problem. And he was a coding machine. It was phenomenal. And one day on the channel, he showed up, and he'd done something amazing, and somebody went, oh, that's so good. I'm going to buy you a steak as big as your head. And after a while, it became like whenever anyone did something very cool on the project, the comment would be, that's amazing. I'll buy you a steak as big as your head. And it's carried on for a while until the first Selenium conference. And in that Selenium conference, we finally got all the committers together for probably the very first time. The original Selenium RC committers, the WebDriver committers, all in the same room. And we literally ran away from the conference. We had to, because people were like hanging on and they're going, can we talk? And it's like, no, running now. And we went to a steak restaurant. And to say thank you, I bought everyone a steak as big as their head. I think David has a photograph of it somewhere. I wasn't savvy enough to actually take a photograph because it was like, I've just spent an awful lot on steak. And now whenever we meet up, the committers will try and go for a steak dinner, if that's an appropriate thing to do. And last night at the speaker dinner, the contributors who were there, I walked around the table, I had a quick look. Every single one of them was having steak. I was like, yeah, that's cool. Don't criticize in public. That's a douche move. What are the consequences of the choices you make that you rationalize to yourself, but can little imagine potentially huge consequences? Tony Schwartz, who co-wrote The Art of the Deal by He Who Must Not Be Named. The things you say now, those negative things, those hurtful things, the way you criticize in public, like, people feel hurt, they feel slighted. In an open source project, they walk away. They don't say thank you. That was a useful lesson you taught me, I really appreciate it. You humiliated me in front of everyone. They walk away. They're not interested. If you do this at work, if you're angry at someone in the office, if you shout at them in front of everyone, you don't make it better. Has anyone ever changed somebody else's mind by shouting at them in the middle of the office? No, you make people more stubborn. You make them more angry, more determined to prove they're right. So, praise in public, criticize in private. Learn how to give feedback. Right? Giving feedback is a really difficult thing to do. I'm not very good at it, I will admit. But there are talks out there, so just take some time out. How am I doing for time, by the way? 10 minutes left. Good. Be aware of learning styles. Different people have different learning styles, and there are 3 main styles. There's the auditory, the bit where you sit there and listen, which you guys are doing right now. Thank you very much. So there's the auditory. There's the visual, like people read, they look at things, they understand it. And there's the kinesthetic, where they learn by doing. When you're working with people, try and figure out what their preferred learning style is. Like, I prefer to listen for a tiny bit and then do something. Other people go like, stop. Like, they want to think about it, they want to draw some diagrams, they want to whiteboard it, they want to figure out people's learning styles. It's a really important thing to do. As an open source project, one of the things that I remember is people seldom treat utilities with respect. People don't view Selenium as, anything other than a utility, like JUnit. It's just a piece of infrastructure that happens to be there. And so occasionally you get people who come to the mailing list, and they're rude. Really offensive, right? And they're rude. And it's like, well, that's because they view it as a sort of piece of software that's always going to be there. They feel like it's a utility, like water or electricity. And when it's not there, when it doesn't work, they get really angry. I used to work on infrastructure at Facebook, and I used to tell people it was like working on sewerage, like the plumbing for sewers. When it works, nobody pays any attention to it. When it goes wrong, there is crap all over the place, and everyone is really upset. And when it works again, nobody says thank you. They go, well, it should have been working in the first place. And the other thing is people only ever ask for help when they're desperate. Like, they get to the end of their tether before they admit in public that they don't know something. And so quite often on the mailing list, you'll get someone going like, so frustrated they drop their clicker. They didn't come there. That wasn't their first option. Their first option wasn't on a mailing list or an IC channel go, I don't know it. They're halfway through a solution. They've been stuck in it for days. Like, the anger and the rage you see in some of the bug reports isn't because, people aren't nice, they're not competent. It's because they're frustrated. And they finally arrive and they go like, help, I'm stuck. Rather than, like, if they'd done it right at the beginning, you'd have gone, oh, well, okay, yeah, it's not a problem. And normally, they've been working on a solution for quite a long time, right? And they ask for mad things. It's like, can Selenium return status codes? And you go, no, it can't return status codes. And they go, well, it should return status codes. And Jim writes epic blog posts. And then people go, it's an easy problem. It shouldn't take epic blog posts. It's clearly a difficult one. And then you go, oh, you don't understand. And you go, hang on a second. Why do you need status codes? And they go, oh, I just want to know whether this page is rendered properly. And you're going, like, what are you talking about? They've given you problem Y, which is the thing they've tried to solve, which is at the end of the rabbit hole that they've gone down. And they're trying to solve problem X. Like, when somebody goes like, I need to do this, pretend you're an irritating 4-year-old child. Why? Why? Like the 5 whys. If they get to the end of that, they're incredibly patient. People are fallible. They make mistakes all the time. They don't understand things. Like, you think you've built shared understanding? Not always. Like, the active listening thing is really important. Someone says something to you, and you think you understand, and just repeat it back to them as you understand it. Don't use their words. Use your words to describe the idea, and if they go like, no, I didn't say vote for him. Then that's fine, right? People are fallible. They make mistakes all the time. And you know what? It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to be wrong. It's okay to do something and go, I tried it and it didn't work. If you don't try, you're never going to succeed. If you don't push yourself, you're never going to grow. If you don't like fail spectacularly every now and again, like, you don't discover things. You learn things about yourself, and you learn things about code, and you learn things about your job when it goes wrong. Success just reinforces the patterns you have. And that's a good thing, because it feels amazing. And failing doesn't feel amazing at all. Failing is embarrassing, humiliating, and difficult. But by taking a step back and reflecting, that's where we grow. That's where we learn about ourselves, and that's where we discover new skills and talents. And it's okay to make mistakes. On an open source project, any source code, you have source control. You commit something, you break it, you get it all horribly wrong, just roll it back. Doesn't matter. We have continuous integration for a reason, right? We write, how many people write Selenium tests here? I'm amazed there are people with their hands down at Selenium conference. It's bold. It's good of you. Glad you're here. Like, we write these tests to allow us to explore it with code, right? And figure out whether the system works. We make a change. We can't check everything. We don't know whether it's all going to be good. But, we'll check it in. We'll run the tests. If they work, they don't. That's great, right? If they fail, that's a wonderful thing. Like Kent Beck, when he talks about TDD, says, write a failing test first. Because you learn nothing if the test is green when you write it. It might be green by accident. The thing might be working in a way that you weren't aware of. Code is complex, like it's emergent complexity. So yeah, we've got continuous integration, we've got source code, we've got understanding, we're human, we'll get over things. I remember going to Selenium Conf in India, and I'd focused on preparing the workshop that Jim did yesterday, the Fix a Bug, Become a Committer. And I did that, and I spent so much effort on that I'd forgotten to put enough effort into the keynote. And I ran out of content. It was one of the more embarrassing moments of my life. And I came off the stage, and people gave me a hug and went, you know what, thank you for trying. That was really good. It would have been better if you'd finished. Because people will tell the truth, right? Being nice doesn't mean not telling the truth. Being nice means don't kick people when they're down, but you can tell people the truth. And although that was an embarrassing experience for me, I actually learned a lot, right? Like I prepared for this talk for once. Right? I didn't just rock up this morning, throw some slides together, go, that'll do. Like, I know it doesn't show, but I put some thought into it. And for us, for me, the reason why I do open source, the reason why I come to conferences, the reason why I write software, so much fun, right? I can't believe people will pay me to write code. Like, it's lovely. You take this problem, right? And I don't know about you, but I kind of see it in my head. Like, I see all the moving pieces. I know, if I put this here, I put that. And a sense of satisfaction when all the pieces mesh together. Like, you've got this perfect puzzle, and it just fits. It's the reason why I'm quite happy to work on a bug. Not actually writing a bug, fixing a bug. Why I'm happy to do that for days. And even if the change is only, I think the smallest change I ever made was 2 characters. It took 3 days, and I changed 2 characters and fixed a bug. It took a long time. I wasn't at my sharpest. But it was so satisfying, right? And the reason why coming to these conferences is fun is I get to hear about all the fun things that you guys are doing and gals are doing. You know, the things you've changed, the problems you've explored, the shape of it. I get to learn stuff. I get to hear people be grumpy. Anthony Marcone does a talk on the actor pattern, which is fascinating, right? He's taken the idea of page objects and then followed it through to its logical conclusion. Like, hey, look, if you apply these ideas, if you know how to write code, you can do these things, and it's great. So open source is about joy. It's about fun. It's about exploring. It's about positivity, right? Like, it's also about people. Like, if I wanted to do code just for the sake of code, what I would do is I would write at home, and I wouldn't make it open source. Like, dealing with people going, it no work. Bug reports beginning with urgent. Asking an open source project what its service level agreement is for fixing bugs. I'll tell you what the service level agreement is, Sonny me Jim Jim Laddo. I'll do it when I feel like it. Patch is welcome. But we do it because it's fun, right? Open source is fun. If you stop having fun, stop working on that project. Go work on something else. It's difficult to do that at work, but, that's it. I think I'm basically out of time, but thank you, everyone, for listening.